Welcome. I'm Lois Requist, President of Benicia Literary Arts, and I welcome you to this event on online publishing and marketing. We have a panel of people with experience that I will introduce to you in just a moment. I want to ask you that you stay on mute and that except when you're going to talk, and turn off your telephones if you could. And I want to say just a little bit about Benicia Literary Arts. We produce events like this and many other kinds for writers, and we publish books. And when I wasn't on the board, I had a book published through Benicia Literary Arts, and we could perhaps talk about that a little bit later if you're interested. But I just wanted to say that because it is one of the important things that we do. If you're a member of Benicia Literary Arts, you can be listed on the website with a link to your website or your blog, your book, all kinds of things. And so we try to make that as useful for members as possible. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists. And the first one I was going to introduce was Karen Mercury, who, as Layla Wolf, has published over 100 novels on Amazon. She broke a rib and she's in a lot of pain and having trouble breathing, so she can't be here. So we'll try to get her another time. I think that she was very, because she has published her books, she's used the tools that Amazon has, and she publishes them there. And so she's really an expert on Amazon. So we'll miss that tonight, but we'll try to pull her in some other time to talk to us about that. Beth Grimm is a published author, lawyer, artist, and teacher, and she will cover her experience in self-publishing and promoting her work. Fiona Hughes is a published author of children's books and a marketing specialist, and she'll discuss her experiences in self-publishing, promoting, and marketing her books and those of others. Jim White, most of you know, he's a published author and former president of Benicia Literary Arts, and he will cover his experiences with websites he has used. Before I call on our first panelist, a bit about how our forum will work. Each panelist will take a few minutes to talk about their experience, sharing tips and websites that could be helpful to you. The names of these websites may show up in your chat. I think Sam is going to try to do that, which you can click on at the bottom of the page. If you've registered by sending me an email, we'll also be sending a few notes from today's event and the websites mentioned. So you should be able to get them one way or the other. Then after our panelists have spoken, we will take questions. You can raise your hand or put the question in chat. Samantha will be helping me to field the questions. Okay, so with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, and that is Fiona Hughes. Welcome, Fiona.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. I've got a slide deck that I'd like to share with you today. And I would hope that you have questions and that we can answer them after the session. We're going to skim through some of these very, very quickly. However, I would love to hear from anybody who's got questions or comments on some of the things we skim over quickly, because that's in the Q&A session. We'll have a lot more time to talk about them. But this is an 8-minute guide to self-publishing and marketing your book. So I've written and illustrated and self-published on Amazon 3 books so far, and produced audiobooks of my children's books since I'm a voiceover artist. Each format has been slightly different. The very first one I did was the one at the bottom here, Charlie's Day at the Beach, which I got inspired to do having been to a workshop on how to self-publish. So I hope that this whole webinar today inspires some of you to get on with it and try it out. So that was an ebook, The Charlie's Day at the Beach. Lefty Goes on the Lam was a bit more of an ordeal, I was going to say, because I illustrated as well as narrated and produced that book. And The Fairy Gathering is an ebook and audio book. So that's the three formats I've dipped my toe into so far. Also, since I've been in marketing for decades and doing public relations, I have somehow ended up with clients who would like to promote their works. And in that case, there's been a travel book, Checking In, as well as a mystical novel by a Hungarian author, as well as editing a children's book for an animal sanctuary about an animal who lives at a specific animal sanctuary. And all the proceeds of that book actually go towards supporting the animal sanctuary. So it's a wonderful tie-in. And then lastly, promoting a book called Through My Eyes, A Story of Hope by a US military gentleman who wrote about his Vietnam experiences. So we wanted to talk with you today about some of the considerations when you're thinking about publishing. For instance, who is the audience for your book? It might have perhaps a local angle, whether it's a guidebook or has a local history or theme, in which case your market and audience is right where you live. And you probably could do the very best job of all of reaching your sellers, whether they be local organizations or souvenir shops or historical groups. If you have a generally more thematic nature, maybe the audience is a nationwide one, in which case a giant like Amazon would be a great place to get the broadest exposure. And then consider what stage your book is at. Is it fully written? Is it proofread and edited and ready to go? And perhaps you've invested already in working with an illustrator. Or maybe you have a manuscript and you don't really mind how long it takes to bring your book about to the widest audience, in which case a traditional publisher, where the publishing company produces and markets your book, might be the very best fit for you. And Jim, who's going to be speaking about this very topic, has some wonderful insights that he'll be sharing later today on the traditional publishing field. But I am involved more in the self-publishing, since that's where particularly I've had success with these three books. And for me, it was the best market for me to dip my toe in the waters. Most of the self-publishing places are free to get started. And it's a great, even if you decide to do later publishing forms elsewhere, it's still a great way to upload your book and get up to 70% of your royalties. Certainly it wasn't without its trial and errors and a few tears here and there, because in uploading the illustrations and doing the book layout on the Amazon KDP platform, I found it, a little challenging, shall we say. But the great part about it is you can control your circulation, how much you charge, and whether you go for print on demand, where there is no minimal order, or whether you decide to order in bulk, which is of course cheaper. So that's a consideration. And we've got in the chat some of the lists of places that you might want to look at when it comes to considering your own self-publishing options. You'll need to do your research and decide whether Ingram Spark or BookBaby or Amazon would be best for you. And then considerations like, do you want to start like I did with an ebook, or go for a software or a soft or hardcover book? Again, these are going to be your choices, and the way your book is going to be used and by whom will help dictate that. For instance, board books, those cardboard books are great for really young audiences. And certainly it makes a wonderful way to be able to augment a book by having an audio version as a nice option you can download for children. Illustrations and front covers are super important, and you really do judge a book by its cover. There's millions and millions of paperback books out there, all of which look identical if you don't include the front and back cover. So you really need to be able to tell your story and what the genre is by the cover. You'll know immediately if it's a bodice ripper or a technical content or a mystery simply from looking at the choice that the author made on the front cover. So it's got to be an arresting choice, and you need to think about how readable it is when it's on that tiny little postage stamp size on an Amazon website, and just how that image is going to come across. How many pages, font size, type, these are all things that you have to take into consideration. I chose a rounded, easy to read font since my book's aimed at children. But look at the competition out there and the books you admire and see who your competition is and what they've chosen. The price of your book is another area. You'll want to do some research so that you'll know how much it costs, what the retail price should be, what your royalties will be, or the percentage that the print-on-demand publishers portion will be. So you want to be able to meet that criteria that they have for Amazon, for instance, which is up to 70%. If it's, I think it's between $2.99 and $9.99, you get 70% of royalties. Images, yes, important to have them high resolution, and you can scan the images or photograph them as long as it's in a high res format. I like to use a high res scanner. And just like on dating sites, please avoid using outdated author photographs, a big no-no. So next, which self-publishing platform do you want to use? Now, as I say, you can really use any one of those that we've just talked about, but Kindle Direct Publishing, which is part of Amazon's publishing service, allows you to get stuck into going into the layout and walks you very thoroughly through how to go ahead and upload your book. So you've written your book. Congratulations, you're 40% of the way there. The rest is arguably the most important element, which is the marketing. Now, establishing a marketing plan early is super important, and we're talking 4 to 6 months before you even produce the book and have it launched. And the key elements that we want to talk about is your messaging, and that is drafting the book jacket blurb and that one paragraph description of Amazon as to how it might look. And what's unique about it? What are your keywords? Those are vital because you'll use those in social media as well as in publishing. You'll need to establish or update your social media presence so that you're sure to have Instagram, Facebook, and you can whet your appetite of your readers by giving them sneak peeks of what your writing is coming along, or just give them a taste of some of the chapters, or maybe even try and build up some anticipation by running a competition so you can have them name a character or a book title. We've got reviews down here. Reviews are really important. You're going to want testimonials and reviews, and you're going to be hitting up friends and families long before your book's released, and ask them to read it and ask them to review it honestly, and then only keep the good ones. But there are blog sites that you can have a look at when we get to the chat session that will actually help you get the ball rolling, and they're professional sites that have reviewers who also can come back with some very constructive criticism for improving your work. So listen and learn from everyone that you send your book out to, because they probably have some great feedback. And those testimonials, you'll be using those as either the foreword, or perhaps you know an eminent person or an author who's already got some expertise in a subject matter who could help endorse your book and provide testimonials. The author website's really important, and creating one for your book, perhaps doing a dedicated web address simply for the title of your book, or at least dedicating a landing page, is going to be really important for this. You're going to want to start your media outreach, and in front of doing that, you have to have a downloadable media kit. And I suggest putting your bio and author images, as well as your social media sites and the contact information, and of course, a Q&A and a book review page with testimonials, and then an all-important book launch press release. You'll have your high resolution images, and those will be all ready to go before you even start your media outreach. You'll also want to line up your sales channels, and you decide whether or not you're going to go wholesale or how stores might want to carry your book. So you get out there and meet your store owners of bookshops and talk to your channels and see how you'd like to sell your book. By the way, I use Square when I'm handling all my in-person transactions and payments. And that way I can also create an invoice and keep track of everything that way. And then the media outreach, when it's all in place and you have everything teed up, that's when your launch happens. And you can do that at a cocktail bar or a friend's art gallery and invite family, friends, the neighborhood, and especially contact the media and invite them to your event. You'll want the bloggers, the newspapers, book reviewers, even podcasts to be able to come out and read and hear about your book and what you're going to be doing with it. So contact your local library. They'll often set you up to do a book reading or even having a signing session. But don't be shy. Start talking to the press, talk to podcasts, local radio, TV stations, have your press kit absolutely ready to email all of those interested. When we did the book media outreach for the Through My Eyes story about the Army soldiers' experience in Vietnam, I ran it to coincide with Veterans Day, and we got multiple radio and TV announcements that were tied to the event. And he got featured as excerpts from his book, and he read in the Rotary clubs, the Lions clubs, and lots of local magazines entirely dedicated a full-page article just to the story and the book. So that's just a little example of how media outreach can really work for you if you plan ahead and get your marketing plan executed month by month. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Fiona. Wow, lots of good information there. Well, that's really helpful. Okay, and I think we want to stop the screen share there. And the next presenter will be Jim White. Jim. We can't hear you.
Hello, everyone. Now you can. I want to thank Lois, first of all, for putting all of this together, and Benicia Literary Arts as well for being the overall organization that supports the kind of activity that we're doing right now. And it pays off, I think, in a big way for our community to have these kind of activities underway. I want to start off by mentioning that a lot of what Fiona talked about is a crossover to my discussion, especially when Fiona references to marketing. Not that I'm a big marketer, nothing compared to Fiona's experience, but those issues and those points of information that she provided are just as valuable for authors who are looking to publish by a publisher instead of publishing on their own as self-publishing. So my emphasis is going to be on authors who are looking to publish through a business, through a publishing business. Personally, I'd much rather talk about writing. Narrative, plot, dialogue, point of view, those are the things that turn me on. But the process to get published is not my favorite activity, and most authors would agree with me. However, in order to present your manuscript to the world with a pretty cover that can be purchased on Amazon, you really need to wear both hats. So what's a writer to do? If you are unprepared or you have many questions when it comes to taking your manuscript and putting it in the hands of a publisher. Well, once it's complete, once you've had it proofread, once you've had it edited, once you've had it reviewed, it's your best foot forward. There are 3 steps to getting it published. The first one, which is probably the easiest of the 3, is finding a publisher. And what is a publisher anyway? How many types of publishers are there? And I've listed about 4 of them. Let me share my screen here. There we go. And Samantha is going to be kind enough to add some of these references and contact points on the chat screen. So If you have interest in getting more information about some of these items I'm going to tick over very quickly, feel free to give me a shout. I have my email and my website addresses down at the bottom of these screens. So feel free to get in touch with me if you'd like to ask anything more in detail about publishing. So anyway, finding a publisher, there are about 4 of them in general. The traditional publishers you all have heard about, HarperCollins, Macmillan, Simon and Schuster. These are the folks that run the books for Stephen King and Nora Roberts and John Grisham. They're a large business. They don't require any fees to the author, and they offer a full service. It's like going to heaven. And I think that in many cases, those opportunities to get into that field, the traditional publishing field, is a difficult one because they're very unsure about any unexperienced authors. Basically, their business plan is they take a chance on your book. They modify the book, they edit the book, they review the book until it meets their requirements or their conditions that they want to meet, and then they take a chance. They sell your book. And if they're successful at picking you as an author and editing your material to the point where they feel it's a marketable product, they'll win in sales. That's their business plan. Other types of publishers work in a different way. Vanity publishers, for instance, are also large businesses. It's a big business. Sometimes it has a difficulty in getting a positive attitude, and they suffer sometimes because of their business process. But nevertheless, they're very active and they're very successful on many accounts. They charge the author, and they usually charge in the neighborhood of $3,000 to $5,000 for a reasonable size novel. They sometimes offer various services. Some of them will sometimes edit your work. Sometimes they will be more specific about details in terms of how they're going to market your book. And sometimes they won't do anything. They'll charge you $3,000 to $5,000, and they will put your book on the market, put it on Amazon or Barnes and Nobles or whatever, and you are on your own. Another type, which has grown in popularity these days, is hybrid publishers, which are kind of a little bit of both traditional and vanity. They're also large businesses. They also charge the author, sometimes somewhat less than what the vanities do. And they offer various services as well, although usually they're pretty minimal. Hybrid publishers are names like TCK Publishing, which I'm personally involved with. And they have hundreds and hundreds of names, business of that type on the market today. And then the final group of publishers is indie publishers. They're a small press. They're growing in numbers. They have probably in the neighborhood of at the most 5 people. Sometimes it's 1 person who's running that press. They also charge authors fees, but they're considerably less than you'd find with the vanities or the hybrid publishers. But what you get instead is personal attention. You'll get in touch with one of their employees, and they'll walk you through until they get to a point where they think your book is ready to be published. That's the positive side. On the negative side, indie publishers can go through all kinds of ramifications. I've had 2 myself, indie publishers, where the person in charge of the business died unexpectedly, and the business just came to a stop, and there was no longer any business activity went on with that title. So sometimes the business faces difficulties when the location of where they do their work gets hit with a rainstorm. I mean, there's a million things that can go on, but the thing is that they're small and they have an unreliable kind of track record, and you have to worry about that when you work with them. So those are the basic publishing types. Now, how do you find these guys? I put up here a few resources that are helpful in getting the author a chance to check out the market and make a decision on their own about what publisher they want to have. Dutrope, which I have up here, is a fee-based service for writers. And it's an extremely effective and very complete type of business. They will offer you every conceivable type of publisher that's out and open these days. They'll tell you about publishers that have closed for their business. They'll tell you about publishers that are no longer active. And they send you out a weekly newsletter of new and updated material, updated titles, and updated businesses that are on the market. They also offer information about agents as well. It's an excellent resource, and I recommend it if you're looking in that direction for a publisher. Submittable is on the opposite standpoint. It charges publishers to standardize and make publishing a little bit easier for them. It provides a formatted kind of platform for publishers to handle their submissions and deal with rejections, deal with record keeping, and so forth. Now, Submittable also offers some benefits to the author by providing the author with an easy to read summary of their submissions to different publishers that subscribe to Submittable. It's very handy. The other three are also very good, and they offer magazines or periodicals online that offer information about new opportunities with new publishing companies and tips on how to get ahead in the business. Author and Publish magazine comes out once a week. Poets and Writers, you may have already heard about. It's a very large organization with a very large magazine and a very, very comprehensive website. Winning Writers is another one, not as big as Poets and Writers, but is also helpful because they combine their references to new publishers with blog posts and seminars. They're pretty comprehensive about that. Now, once you've decided, you've found a publisher that you like, and you've gone through and picked one out, an indie publisher, for instance, that Dutrope recommends and has a word count that is going to work for you. How do you know for a fact that the publisher is legitimate? These items down here, Absolute Right, Writer Beware, the Authors Guild, and the Alliance for Independent Authors are great resources to reference to find out if the publisher that you've chosen has a record. Maybe it's a good record, maybe it's a bad one, but it gives you at least a leg up on finding out what is ongoing as far as the publisher that you've chosen. All right, so now you've picked a publisher. What's the next step is to approach the publisher. Here, the most important thing is looking at the publisher's submission requirements and writing a cover letter. You want to read that submission requirements very carefully, because everything under the sun is you're going to find when it comes to looking at publishers' requirements. Sometimes they want a writer's sample. Sometimes they want you to include the full manuscript. You always want to send the file with the manuscript using the book title as the file name. Sometimes the responses from the publisher's submission requirements requires an email or an online form of their own, or something from Submittable, like I was just talking about. Then the cover letter is your introduction to the publisher, and it shouldn't be any longer than a page. You want to include a salutation and find the names of the editors. So you don't just say, "Hello, editor." You say, "Hello, Mrs. Brown." You provide them with your contact information, a brief elevator pitch, maybe 3 or 4 sentences, not long, about your book. A note regarding simultaneous submissions. You want the publisher to know that you're submitting to other publishers as well, and you promise to let the publisher know if you're accepted by somebody else. And also include a biography. Also, you want to make sure you keep careful record of all submissions, rejections, and withdrawals, so that you don't get embarrassed by asking the publisher a second time after you've already been in touch with them. And finally, let me wrap this up in a hurry, a contract. Once you're lucky enough to have yourself a publisher online, make sure you look at the contract carefully. Also, when the publisher is finished with putting your manuscript together, they're going to send you what's called an author review copy, which is a final look at whether they have got your manuscript down correctly. You want to look at that, go over it carefully. I have a little example here of a markup table that you send back to the publisher that shows them any changes that you need to have done. And then finally, all of the publishers that you've been in touch with have to be informed that you have made a decision, and unfortunately it's not theirs. That's a matter of courtesy, and it's important that you make sure it's so that down the road, you may want to go back, and if they know you didn't do that, you have a couple of strikes against you. That basically sums it up for right now. Like I said, there's a lot more, but for right now, this is at least a start in terms of what it takes to get yourself out there with your manuscript. Thank you. All right.
Sorry, I was on mute. I want to thank you, Jim. There are really a lot of good tools there, and I have used some of those that Jim had told me about before, and so I know that they really are very helpful. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Beth Grimm. Beth, take it away.
Okay, thanks. I just want to say that's a ton of information that you have just given everybody and me, and I am so appreciative of the time you took to lay that all out and the amount of work that you do to get your books published. I'm approaching things from a little different angle. I do nonfiction writing, and I'm approaching things from a little bit different angle today to give you some food for thought, kind of help you think outside the box with regard to nonfiction writing and how powerful that can be and productive. First of all, the key thing about that is to get clear on what you want to write and what you want to do with it, and get sort of in your mind what you would consider success. There's a lot of different kinds of success. It isn't always about money. It might be about being recognized. It might be about helping somebody. It could be about so many different things. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is using nonfiction to build your business. And I'm going to tell you from my experience how I made this work, but your business could be selling your books. And so this information is intended to help you with some of those things. Think about how you really get a business rolling, get known, get found. So writing's such a powerful tool. I didn't have any undergraduate degree, but I wrote an essay on life and work experience in a law office to get into night school at 34 years old. And after 4 years of study, I became a lawyer and I was ready to build a business. So I found some tools that were helpful. I had a 30-year, really successful practice. And I found some tools that were really helpful to me to build my business. And again, keep in mind, this could be a book selling business for you. It could be marketing your own materials. E-newsletters. I started right out of the gate as an attorney with a newsletter that I submitted in those were the olden days when we were doing print. There wasn't social media was a baby in the womb. It wasn't out yet. So I started a simple newsletter where I would take one law that was convoluted and difficult to understand, and I would translate it into plain English. My newsletter was the Homeowners Association Legal Digest, and everything was written in plain English. And so that started a process of me being recognized as a plain English lawyer. So I started building a brand at this time. Then I got the newsletter online when online came on board, and I changed the name of it to What's New in HOA Land, because I was finding through doing seminars and work in condo law that people had so many questions and they wanted to know what a law meant, what they could do about dogs and people and pets and parking and all that stuff. So I started this e-newsletter called What's New in HOA Land, and that became widely popular among condo people searching for answers. So targeting a target audience is an important thing to consider when you are building a business. And in this case, I wanted to target the audience, instead of speaking to lawyers or people, who had a certain high level of knowledge, I wanted to appeal to real people who needed help navigating the murky waters of living in or providing services to a homeowners association. So one thing for you to think about is, what is your target or audience with any writing project that you plan to do? Platforms. I used Constant Contact for my e-newsletter. MailChimp is another one that's popularly used today. As Fiona said, or not Sam, or I don't know, this Sam introduced me to MailChimp, but I used Constant Contact for years. And through these platforms, you can use their templates to help design your newsletters, which is really nice. You can use their links to bring in subscribers, and you can use their export function to use those contacts for other things, which is really nice. And they start out free, and then they usually then start charging after you have a certain number of subscribers. In other words, they start to make money when you are supposedly making money. And as far as managing an email list, if you have 100 email people that you send out to, and you send them all at once, not all of them are going to make it, because I just look at it as jamming up the pipe. But the platforms use algorithms and send them out one at a time. And then if you have a list of 5,000 subscribers, which is what I eventually got, it's obviously unmanageable on your own. And so the platform is important if you want to do some outreach. Websites, some people today just skip the website idea and go straight to doing a blog, and they look a lot like websites, and you can even sell books on a blog. So if I were starting out right now with just books, I might consider just starting with a blog. And a blog is basically information. It stands for weblog. That's where the name came from. So let's say that you want a website. You might have the greatest website in the whole world, but no one comes because they can't find you among the vast competition in your type of business. So branding is important. And I talked about from the very beginning, branding myself as the plain English lawyer. That helped me stand apart from other people. And in your writing work, you might think of something that's important. Like if you're a caregiver, the compassionate caregiver might be a name that you might adopt if you're writing self-help books on caregivers. My brands included not only that, but I also started a website called the California Condo Guru early on. And my thinking is I wasn't presenting myself as, this great Maharishi on top of a mountain, but I was a resource. I intended to be a resource for people. So I felt comfortable using the name California Condo Guru, and through 30 years it stuck. And today, if you Google CaliforniaCondoGuru.com, my curriculum vitae still comes up, and portions from some of my articles. Some Good Samaritan has kept it going, even though I let the site go 4 years ago when I retired. But these brands stuck, and they gave people a way of perceiving me as who I wanted to be perceived. And recognition, in whether you're an author or whether you're a lawyer or whether you're a doctor, dentist, or a baker, name and face recognition is really important if you want to market your wares. For blogs, I did two types of blogs to draw people in. Q&A was the format, and I did one for homeowners and one for board members. And then in all my blogs, in all my newsletters, and everything I put out, I had links to my website, and on my website, people could then find articles that I'd written for publications. And I had so many things on my website that were helpful. It wasn't just a pretty picture of a lawyer on the front page saying I just solved $1 million case. It was actually good information for people. And what it did for me is it promoted me to a level where I could compete with the biggest firms in the state as far as being an expert in this field, because it was clear that I knew what I was talking about. And so, that's kind of a picture you can establish for yourself, is I don't need to tell people I'm good. I just need to show them I'm good at what I do and worthy of their attention to my whatever I have that's marketable, whether it's services or books. I picked up this great little book at one of the workshops I went to called How to Blog a Book. So all my blogs ended up and came to fruition in a book that was picked up by a publishing company, a Source Books publishing company, called Condo Owner's Answer Book. And that's still available on Amazon today, and the royalty checks are still dribbling in. So anyway, and I got a lot of my writing done through repurposing information. So that's a really a good way of saving yourself. And really quickly, I just want to talk about post-retirement writing. My post-retirement writing has been in the form of memoirs, stories about aging, stories about road tripping, which I love to do. And it hasn't been about the money. It's been more about the process, the journey, not the destination. So I have one book, The Great Grandpa Chronicles, which I've shared widely at Rotary meetings with people. I've book swapped, I've sold some, I've done a lot of things with it, but not heavily marketed it using these tools I've talked about. But for me, it presented a way to poke fun and scratch the sarcastic itch about my ego testicle, I'll call him, narcissistic father, which made our relationship really difficult. I started out writing fun stories then about the birthday parties that he commandeered every 5 years after he was 75. He was a little too old to just continue a life of gambling and commercial real estate and playing golf. Those were the things he preferred over family. And he started wanting us to show up. So I'll give you just one quick example of one of the stories. He'd announce in the mornings, Krispy Kreme donuts are the breakfast of champions. And then he'd send someone out to go get donuts, which usually ended up to be my son and my son-in-law. And I'm sure they ate donuts on the way back. But this tended to sugar up the kids and the grandkids. And then when great grandpa would start to try and take control, he'd just lose it and everything would turn to chaos. And fodder from those kinds of things made great stories in my book. But what happened really was in this 5-year process of writing these stories and starting to see them through my grandchildren's eyes, my children, my grandchildren's eyes who didn't have any baggage, I started to soften toward him. And I really made a journey from ambivalence to love for him. So for me, the book was, it was just a joyful thing. It was a triumph, and it took me on that journey from ambivalence to love. And I've shared it with other people who had similar experiences with difficult relatives that have helped them look at things a different way. So for my nonfiction memoir type of book, I got lots of joy out of it and satisfaction. And so what I would say, the real key to being happy in writing is to determine what success looks like for you, and then keep your eyes on the prize. And I'll say, you know, there's an old thing, you can get anything you want at Alice's restaurant. Well, these days you can get anything you want on Google, or you can find out how to do anything on YouTube. So I've used a host of websites. I've been to a host of workshops. I have 1,000 resources. I could make up a list, but really you can find out specifically what you want to know about by Googling or by using YouTube. And then you can find me at BethGrimmCreativeArts.com. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Beth. Yeah, that's very helpful. Okay, well, take a deep breath. You've heard 3 interesting presenters. I wanted to ask Jim specifically, while the rest of you can either hold your hand up or you can put a question in chat and we will answer it. How much of the time that you spend either writing or working on marketing, how much of it do you spend on the process you said that you don't like as much, and that is trying to get the product sold and marketed?
My day typically starts out by looking at the resources for publishers. I don't feel like writing in the morning, and I'll compile a list of potentials. And sometimes there aren't any, but most days I'll see 2 or 3 publishers that seem to make sense and look like a fit with a story or 2 of mine that I'm working on. And once I've made a decision about 1 or 2 or 3 publishers, I'll start looking at, I'll spend about an hour with a cover letter. I'll investigate the publisher a little bit and then put together a plan to approach them. So I'd say every day I put in about an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. Well, and quickly, Fiona, now your approach is a little different but you are a marketer. But how do you divide your time?
Well, I'm a freelancer, so I'm the one who'll probably be responding to things at 9 o'clock at night if it stirs me. Yeah, I really can't give too much advice, but I do really stand by the idea of making a plan and having to work through it. Because like Jim said, it's probably not the favorite thing that people enjoy doing. And so unless you take it in small chunks and do it step by step and say, okay, today I'm going to make 3 phone calls out to publishers, or I love doing events, so I'm much more likely to want to arrange a library book event than I would be to potentially get rejection letters from publishers after about 4 months. So, you tend to want to do the things you enjoy the most. But in actual fact, if you just take it step by step every day and just take, say, 3 things that you want to get done, slowly you start seeing the process come together and realize that, hey, you know what? I'm all the way down my to-do list. Otherwise, it can be just daunting. And as we said, 60% of the work is in the marketing now that you've written the book.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of amazing. Okay, do we have any questions? Does anyone, let's see, I'll change the view so I can see everybody. Do we have some questions? Or do you have questions in the chat?
I can look in the chat and see if there's questions. I just wanted to say, for some reason, I can't paste Jim's information into the chat. Jim, if you can paste it in, maybe it will work, but for some reason it won't paste. Louise is asking, how do I join Benicia Literary Arts?
Okay, and Louise, you can do that online. You just at our website, or if you need more information than that, I'll send it to you personally.
Thank you. I had 2 members send me the information. Thank you.
Oh, okay, good.
And then Louise also asked, Beth, please put in the chat the name of the newsletter aid that you mentioned. You're muted, Beth.
It's Constant Contact is what I use, but I'll put that in MailChimp. I'll put those in the chat.
Okay. And then Shauna asks, any recommendations for publishers of poetry?
Well, she's not on the panel, but Mary might know something, Mary Eichbauer, but poetry's tough.
There are a lot out there. You just really have to just Google, just find journals, online journals, if you can, and read them and see if your work fits and if their requirements fit the kind of poetry you write, and then submit. And Submittable works really well for poetry as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Really scratch the surface. So I think some of the other resources that others here, that Jim in particular has posted, will work well for poetry as well, but you just have to look into it.
A good resource for looking at poetry publishers would be Poetry Flash. It's a newsletter and a website specifically for poets and writers, but they have a lot of information about poetry publishers.
Can you repeat that, please? The name Poetry, I didn't get the
Flash.
Poetry Flash.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good one, Ken. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, a good one. Well, I don't know that are there any other questions right now?
I've got a question.
Okay.
As somebody who has self-published, do you know, Jim, whether or not publishers would find it worthwhile considering you're sending them a manuscript to do a like a hard copy version and use their own illustrations. I'm just wondering whether or not that might be a good way to go with some children's books. But having already done a self-publishing effort, I don't know if that nixes the market. Do you have any idea?
I don't think that would interfere or be a problem.
No.
Publishing in a certain genre doesn't negate the prospect for publishing in another one. For instance, I've published a couple of novellas in science fiction, and I've also published some novellas in historical fiction, and it's never been, something that has stood in the way. Sometimes the publisher has a certain interest in a particular genre. There's obviously many publishers who love mysteries. There are publishers dedicated to historical fiction as well, and so on and so forth. But I wouldn't stop from publishing with a background in a certain genre. Not at all. Don't let that interfere with your future plans.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's good advice.
Well, I'm going to take a second here to, I mentioned this in my introduction. I had a book published, Late Harvest Green, and I had it published when I wasn't on the board through Benicia Literary Arts. And the process was I submitted it to Mary Eichbauer as our editor-in-chief, and she read it along with a couple of other people read it. And when it's Benicia Literary Arts, which I guess we're one of those small presses, I think that's where we'd fit into Jim's categories. The nice part about it is that they, Mary and the readers, they didn't look at it like, is this something we can turn around and publish tomorrow? They looked at as far as quality, and we worked on it for quite a while. Mary would look at it, she would make some suggestions, and the type of editing that she was doing as she was kind of looking at the overall. Do the themes work? Does the arc of the story, all of those things, does it work? And then she would send it back to me, and usually it took me a few days to even approach it because, we feel so protective of our work. But I will say that one of the things that's unique about Benicia Literary Arts, and I don't think you can get this too many places, is that if they see something they feel has value, they will work with you. Mary works with you to get it to the point that it's as good as it can be and to get it published. And so we went back and forth a number of times. I don't even remember how many. And until we got it to the point that we were both satisfied with it, and then published it as a soft cover, and then as an ebook as well. So that's really a service I think it's hard to find now, is to find an editor who looks seriously at your work, and if it's not quite there, they keep helping you. It's made me really learn to appreciate the editing process. So I would say that if you have something that you would like to see published, think about submitting it to Benicia Literary Arts. Do we have some more questions?
There's nothing left in the chat to ask, but maybe somebody.
Gail has her hand up.
Yeah, I guess so those people that write children's books, I think it was Fiona, right? I have a question. I do songwriting. I wanted to write a child's book on a series of like a Dr. Seuss kind of about a dog. And do they do collaborations, in children books writings, Fiona, or is it always like a single person?
No, a collaboration is a good idea if you have a strength and you know of someone, or you want to be able to work with somebody else who can bring something else to it, whether it's an illustration or a writing skill, to be able to put both of those heads together and come up with a stronger product is a great idea, Gail.
Yeah, you know where I would look, Fiona, because I was looking for, I write the rhymes, I write this.
Right.
So I thought, well, Dr. Seuss on would be kind of cool, of a child, sort of a series,
Yes,
of a
right.
dog versus,
And so which elements would you be looking to have some partnering with?
I don't know, like another author or
Uh-huh.
somebody said experience with children writing,
Yeah. Well, certainly a good place to start is, do you know Upworthy and Fiverr? I mean, those places are
Fiverr, I do. Fiverr,
yeah, great places to start, and just because they have such a wealth of talent out there. I've actually used one of those resources just to be able to find an illustrator for someone who wanted digital art, and I don't do digital art. I do watercolor illustrations primarily. So I was able to put somebody in touch with a digital artist that way. But I did notice that they have very inexpensive resources around the world where you can team with people who have successfully authored and produced books too. So if you're at that stage where you kind of want to have a nudge and want to discuss something, certainly start doing your research on somewhere like Fiverr and see whose talents kind of match what you're looking to do, and then approach them in a sort of partnership arrangement.
the other question I have sort of for everyone out there, and I think maybe Jim, because I think Jim might know this because we talked about it once, right? Graphic novels, right? Is if you write a graphic novel, then I heard that if you're writing a screenplay, those of us that are screenplay writers, that they tend to pick up something that's been made it into a graphic novel. So what does anyone know about graphic novels? Anything? I think Jim knows a little bit about it because I think he told me at one point he was going to do a graphic novel, or if I remember right, Jim, maybe, I don't know.
I must have been out of my mind.
That's probably our next webinar, which Karen might be able to help with. I don't know whether you mean by graphic. What do you mean?
I don't know that much about it. I just, I'd written a couple of screenplays in my time, probably like everybody else in the room, right? And, I was told.
So Gail, is it, when it's a graphic novel, obviously.
Like a comic books, they make it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But,
okay.
and then the producers tend to look at that as you have a much better chance getting picked up in the screen world. I heard is if you do a graphic novel. I don't know how true that is, but it's an interesting area in itself, I suppose, or the graphic novel.
Can I just chime in for a minute?
Yeah.
If you go to Zeppelin Comics on Benicia's First Street, you can just talk to the owners about graphic novels and they will share hundreds of them with you so you can take a look what they're all about.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's a next panel. That's an interesting one, right? Yeah.
I also like to add to Fiona's list about resources, one that I've just recently found as far as collaboration and looking for partnerships is a website called Editcetera, EDITCET, I think it's EDITCETRA. They're a local business out of Berkeley, and they pair you up with contractors and freelancers.
Interesting.
Fiona,
I heard.
Sorry.
Who's go ahead.
I was going to ask Fiona to explain what Fiverr and the other thing that you mentioned that was similar. Explain to everyone what those are. Maybe people don't know what that is.
Yeah, those are sites that you can look for resources, whether it be to find an illustrator, for instance, or somebody to edit, review, help write your words. So you can use these people around the world by arranging, for instance, what kind of hourly rate they charge. And they're usually very, very low price, hence the name Fiverr. And yeah, the two sites are Fiverr, which is Fiverr, and Upwork, UPWORK. And those are a couple that come to mind as far as freelance sites where you team with someone and collaborate.
And they have people that do all kinds of things, websites, anything that you might need over the internet, I guess, because they could be in any
Right.
country around the world.
Yes, exactly. You can use it. They're used in business in all kinds of capacities. You could have people who are developing databases and spreadsheets and you name it. They've got a wealth of people out there, and you just have to read the reviews. Like doing Airbnb or anything else, you want to read up on what it is that they do and how they. I mean, some I've contacted when looking for this illustrator, and they've been super responsive and gotten back to me within a couple of hours. Others say, well, I'm actually booked till February, so don't, so it's kind of like you have to do a little bit of work to find out who the good ones are, and you'll read the reviews and get an idea of how they work, look at their works, ask for examples of them, and then sort of start building a business relationship with them. Often I've found, and as I'm a freelancer who works internationally, it's really useful to be able to, if Gail was sending, for instance, something that she wanted some ideas on, she could send the work over to them. They're working internationally, and they might have something on your doorstep when you wake up in the morning ready for you to review. So it can be advantageous working on a global basis.
I could just add to that, Fiona. I actually did a song with a couple of people from on Furby that I met, a great musician and a songwriter from Spain. It was really very interesting, working with people globally. It was just kind of fun. So it's a really, it's actually a very professional site too. It's very well managed. So, so I've had some experience with them in the music world, it's a little different. Yeah.
Good to hear.
I wanted to ask a question of the panelists or anyone who would like to address it. I've heard the word several times, brand, and marketing people have said to me, you need to brand yourself. Well, I don't think they mean take a hot iron and do that. So I wonder how much any of you have thought about that, or how, frankly, I don't know how to brand myself. I have a work that I'd like to get out there within the next year or so. And so I'd like to know how you brand yourself.
Well, I'll take a stab at it, because I think if you do any outreach through social media, or you appear and do author talks, or you go to Rotary meetings or anything, I think if you have a handout or a card and you have a consistent name on it, I mean, your name is not your brand, but if you write about certain things, like I said, if you're writing about caregiving, or you're writing about dragons, or you're writing about something else, you're going to want to pick a name like Dragon Slayer or Compassionate Caregiver, or something that is going to give people an idea of what you're about. That's really what branding is to give the public. And then, when you advertise on Facebook or Instagram or social media or newsletters or blogs, you always, when you put links into the different sites on all those places, you somehow refer to that same thing, and then people begin to associate that with you. So that's my idea of a brand.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, that was a good précis on what branding is. I mean, it's just basically the look and feel that you want to portray about your work. So it's in the words you use, how you describe yourself, what the heading is for your note paper and your business card, and the colors that you'll use. So you want to be able to say, what am I, what is the product or the item that I'm putting out there? Say, for instance, if it's lawn care, whatever the subject is, you think, what would I need for that? Well, something maybe green, something friendly, something approachable. Start thinking about whatever it is you're offering and how that can best be portrayed and received by your audience. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
could further that a little bit more too, because depending on what you're using to communicate with others, what Fiona said was meaningful in terms of when I used it, when I used a rose color for my stationery, my envelopes, my business cards, my newsletter, my books, one of my books, I used the same color and everything, and it was a soft, appealing color. So the combination of a color and referrals it's powerful if you use it enough. But the only way it's going to be of any value is if you use it in some form of outreach or on your website, where people are going to come, hopefully.
Right.
Yeah.
Jill
Okay.
had a question in the chat that says, I'm at a much more beginning stage. What do you use to formate or create the book? I've heard of Pages. Is there one software or an app that is recommended? And Mary replied, I'm not an expert, but many people use PageMaker or InDesign. Both of them have a steep learning curve. I'm sure others have better suggestions. Does anyone else have any more to say about that one?
Well, I got the easy out because I just wrote the book on my computer and it was in Word. And when you work with the publishing service called Kindle Direct Publishing, which is called KDP from Amazon, you are walked through the process as to how to upload not only the Word documents, but also it gives you a chance to do a layout and a mock layout as to how many words and paragraphs you want on each page. And you can kind of plan it and upload it directly from Word. I'm not saying it's flawless and particularly easy, but it's doable. And as I say, having done it all in a Word to start off with, I feel like that's perhaps the easiest way.
Yeah, I agree with that Word is the most universal format, I think, for self-publishing on the print-on-demand sites. InDesign is nice for designing books, for putting books together, and I used I can't even remember the name of it, Publisher program for years and years for setting up newsletters and things. But if you're planning on doing something that you want to fit into a Kindle template or some other book template, I think Word is very universal. I would say do not ever use Pages in the iOS version of Pages. There's an app that people put things in and then they send them out and nobody can open them up that doesn't use Apple devices. So Word, I think, is very universal for the beginner, the best.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
have everything in Word, but it's not formatted as a book. It's just separate pages. But I'll look at KDP. About 20 years ago, I and my husband published short books using createspace.com. Now it's changed its name, but it is Amazon. So I'll just try that again. Thank you very much.
Well, with Word, you can cut and paste. That's the joy. That's the great thing of it.
Right.
I remember in some self-publishing, they would have you do your headings a certain way and your first sentence a certain way and all that. But these days, I don't know, Fiona can speak to this. I don't think you have to format your Word. I think you use it in a cut and paste fashion. And you can put images in your Word file too, and then have them there.
Yeah,
I think that Book Baby is worth looking at. Publishers Weekly is, they've been around in the publishing business for longer probably than any of us have been alive. And it's, but they have developed this part, which is called Book Baby, which is really for self-published people or people like us who maybe haven't hit the big time. And I don't know enough about it to give a lot of detail. I'm just learning about it, but I think it's worth pursuing. And I do think that they sometimes now are having contests that you can enter and get. To get a review from Publishers Weekly is difficult. You have to submit it months ahead of publishing the book. So It's worth looking into. And Ken, I think you were trying to say something. Is that true?
You're on mute, Ken.
Yeah, I probably was, but it's gone.
Okay, okay.
I would
All
say
right.
two other sites that my brother has used is Lulu is a good site. And then Blurb is, you can even do magazines and things in Blurb. I don't know if you can do that in some of the other sites, but Blurb is good, is a site I've used too. So those two are self-publishing print on demand sites. And then people can buy the books from there.
If you've got an ebook, which again, as I say, I just started out cautiously, having come back thoroughly excited about how to publish your own book. And I'm like, I'm writing a book and I'm going to publish it tonight. So that's what I started to do. And as an ebook, that was very gratifying because I was able to write it quickly, find the illustrations, put it out there. So there's a company called Koto B. I haven't been to it, but I've read other people saying it's really very, very useful. KOTOBEE. And apparently with a few clicks, you're able to make an ebook on that platform and you get 100% of the royalties of your ebook. So they don't even deduct a fee. So that's one to explore. And I only found out about that recently and haven't looked into it, but maybe a good resource.
Yeah.
Great.
Wow.
Good, good.
Anyone else? You have some more questions or?
I have
We
a
all-
question for Fiona. Just curious about how, with your marketing and self-publishing, how have your sales been and how do people find you?
Well, like a lot of marketers, I am terrible at marketing my own work, but I'm really good at doing everything else for my clients. So let's talk about the successful people, and that is like my clients. So we talked a bit about how to get the word out there and how to build your marketing program for it. But in doing so, you really want to think about what the end result is, like Beth was saying. Because, for instance, on that story that I illustrated for the Francisco the Pig, the goal was to bring awareness to a vegan lifestyle and to an animal sanctuary specifically. And by building a story around the main character in the animal sanctuary, this Francisco the Pig, we wanted to be able to have something that they could sell in their sanctuary and for all the proceeds to go back to the sanctuary and help its working life, and also to encourage veganism. So in doing that as the main success factor, we hit it on all levels. I mean, there's still books being ordered every month, and there's still a nice little royalty that goes towards the animal sanctuary. And people love to be able to go there as a visit, pet the animals, buy a book. So that, like Beth was saying, is the reward for that particular book. The most professional book, as I say, I think I've worked with is the Vietnam guy who wrote about his stories. And for that, it just seemed like anybody who might be interested in a military experience, a story, especially around Veterans Day, that was my main target for being able to go out and get that book promoted and sold. And it was very well received. It was a very professional looking book, well put together. It has an iconic photograph of the author on the front. And a short side note on that, I used to work at Time Life Publishing back in as a temp. I knew nothing. And I was given a temp job as an editor at Time Life. Well, I had not a clue of what I was doing. But they gave me a photograph of a very handsome GI in a battle-torn Vietnam field. And they said, put this in, make sure it gets copyrighted. And I'm like, what? And I didn't know what to do. And I'd say to him every day, I wish I could help you in your horrible battle. And I wish you could help me. Fast forward 30 years later to Clayton. And I'm going for pizza about the third time in a week on a really, really rough year. And an old man stopped me and dropped a book on my pizza box and said, I think you can help me publish my book and get it out there. It was the same guy. It was his book. Such is karma, right? And so I said, yes, I can help you. I've wanted to help you for 30 odd years. And so, yeah, I just sat down with him and we worked out over the weeks a publishing plan, how we were going to promote it, what we were going to do. And yeah, karma came full circle on that one. So that was a little cute side story.
I was gonna say, Fiona, I know Francisco the Pig. I've seen it.
Oh, you have?
Yes, yes. I don't know if it's in the school I used to teach. How long has it been out? Because
Oh, it's about 3 years now.
I've seen it somewhere.
Oh, I'm so glad. Probably down at the Once Upon a Canvas store where they sell it.
No, I haven't lived in Benicia that long. I've seen Francisco the Pig before.
Oh, good. That's great news.
Yeah, I just want to tell you, it rings a bell to me. I saw it immediately when I said, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I digressed on the how to market, but this just depends so much on your type of book, on who your audience is and what you want to get out of it.
And do you recommend, like, you had all those lists of things. I had someone else tell me, don't try to be on everything. Don't try to be on Twitter and Instagram and all of them. Choose 3, like choose maybe Facebook, or Twitter, or Instagram, but not both. And limit it so that you can keep up with them, because I know like a blog doesn't do you any good unless you keep it moving all the time.
Yeah, that's right. And that's certainly where Beth does so well, because it's the continuity of getting that message out. And you're right, social media, you just need to be able to keep it fresh. If you undertake too many different social media sites, you'll end up just being bogged down and probably not get to any of them. So better to pick a couple of things that you can stay consistently with and keep hammering home the message, or your excerpts, or news of when your launch is going to be, or who the writer is that you've teamed with, whatever you can think of that makes a nice little news hook and engages people.
Well, I
And
have a little different take on that, because I think it doesn't take a lot of time, like I was saying, for when you repurpose work. So if you set yourself up a schedule on, say, every Monday morning to do social media, and you are on Facebook and you are on Instagram and you are on Twitter, there's no reason why, where you're sitting there, you can work with the same excerpt or two, the same format, and change up just a few little things and put something up in each place. You could do it on a daily basis. You could do it 3 days a week, but it doesn't take that much more time to hit 2 sites than it does to hit 1.
And I've also heard about how TikTok made short videos a big thing. So now on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, they all have short videos, or they call it reels. And that's what people are looking at nowadays. People just go through those videos and just keep swiping through and seeing more and more. And you can waste a half hour doing that. But your video could get into that feed if you put up enough of those little short videos.
Yeah, it's kind of like a blog. I mean, you could do little videos of yourself reading excerpts from your book.
That's a good idea.
Or you could have a voiceover artist do it.
Well, Fiona is a great voiceover artist. She did videos for me that were narrated wonderfully. Yeah, she has a beautiful voiceover voice.
But Beth's so right. You know, if you have the repurposing is the smartest thing, because when we think about it, we've all written lots of material, but have we ever thought about repurposing it and turning it into a book, perhaps, or an ebook? That could be hugely empowering and useful for an audience. So think about all the things, whether it's articles on various things that you've written in your past, and how you can accumulate those like Beth did and turn it into an ebook and start publishing.
For me, I'm like Jim said this earlier, the mindset that works on marketing is like a total different mindset than the mind that writes. And it's like you almost have to, it's just like a split. And if I'm listening to all of you and I thought, oh yes, I've got to do this and I've got to do that and I've got to do, I can't do both. I have to either, sometimes I say I'll take one day a week and I'll spend that on trying to do the marketing. I can't combine them at all. And Jim has a way of doing that because it's just a total different mindset.
Well, the thing is, there are always people who are willing to do it for you, and that you can, that is affordable. And Fiona has talked about some of these sites, Fiverr, somebody else talked about Fiverr, or Fiona, or I've had her do things. I've had situations where I'd rather spend my time writing than I would doing videos. So I would have Fiona do them. I would pay somebody to do them. So it's a matter of, you know, what's more valuable to you, money or time? But you've got to give one of them. You've got to let loose of one of them to be able to market. And most artists abhor marketing, and the ones that are successful are the ones that embrace it either themselves or get somebody to help. And that's what helps them take off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a good point, Beth. Well, we're just
also there's that feeling, and I suffer from this horribly of you know, I hate tooting my own horn, so it's sometimes really uncomfortable for us to be able to go out and say, hey, look at my book, you know. I mean, you know, it's easier to do it for somebody else. So maybe there could be a networking between our group if we all take somebody else and help promote that.
Well, and it isn't, the right and left brain aren't so separated between artists and marketing that you can't find I found a cohesive way in my law practice to be creative about crafting a practice the way I wanted. And the way I did that is I educated myself on marketing, educated myself on a lot of different things. And then that allowed me to craft. So I was using really the right side of my brain to create a logical business. So they're not that far apart. It's just a matter of opening up your mind to, oh, this could be fun. You know, this could be fun. I make some funny things to put up on Facebook or Instagram, or I come up with some funny quotes, or I put in a funny hat and do a video, or, you know, it could be fun if you think a little bit more broadly than, oh my God, I hate to do this so much, it's going to be a drudge.
Well, you're right, Beth. And one thing is, if you do some things and you get some success, then that's very rewarding. You know, that feels really good if you get some attention or someone notices what you've done. So that's the reward, you know. So it takes a little time, but yeah, it can be fun and it can be exciting if you're successful.
I'd like to piggyback on what Beth said about making it fun. I know for me, it's really easy to get hung up on, oh my God, this has to be really polished. I have to rehearse this video and make sure I don't say or too much or whatever. But the truth is, when I look at the things that appeal to me and I see what appeals to a lot of other people, because some of these videos get massive numbers of hits, is people are charmed. If you're just yourself, you maybe have a little gimmick, like, you know, I dabble in real estate a lot, and there's one guy who is like the real estate guy in the car, and he's always narrating while he's driving, and he's got this spiel, but it's not scripted. It's coming out, you know, he's talking about some house that's on the market in the neighborhood and something that happened with it or whatever. Another real estate agent I know recently recorded his outtakes, exiting a house and saying, and this wonderful house, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and then he makes a mistake and he says, wait a minute, I got to go back and do this over again. And 3 or 4 times you're watching him practice how he gets to the point where he can narrate his open house. And so those kinds of things are very charming to people, I think. And it's like I say, it's very easy to get hung up and then you don't do it because you think it has to be perfect.
Yeah, I did some live feeds on Facebook last year, a couple of years ago, before the pandemic, maybe a little bit during, where I just went out and I found other artists had go out with me and I interviewed the artists on the live feeds. And so you could do that for your writer friends too. You know, you could go over and have coffee and, hey, let's talk about a book, and they do get a lot more looks than any picture you ever put up. I know that. So yeah, there's lots of ways, we have to make life fun. Otherwise, it's a lot of work.
Right. Yeah. Well, I tell you, we're just about to close. Is there anything that anyone wants to say before we do? Any last question or comment?
I would just say thank you, everybody, for showing up. It's fun to have these events when somebody besides the panelists is here too. The panelists are great, but it's always nice to have people interested in what we want to share. So thanks.
Well,
Thank you. And thanks again to our panelists.
Thank you, presenters.
Yeah, that was really helpful.
Thank
And
you for
nice to
instigating
see
it,
you
Lois.
all. And we hope to see you again at another event.
Good.
Bye.
Bye.